Hey guys, welcome back into this episode of Business Night with Gibson Odoka Jr. We're going to be talking about the illusion of job security. War is unfortunate. I don't preach for people to get jobs. I preach for entrepreneurship. I evangelize entrepreneurship, and I want everyone to be entrepreneur. For me, is a life calling. More the way people evangelize Christ, I evangelize entrepreneurship. Reason being, I want you all to be saved. I want you all to get into the entrepreneurial, roller coaster ride. And for many people, they believe in getting paid employment because they believe they will have what we call job security. They'll be able to get pension when they grow old. With paid employment, they don't have to think a whole lot. It's just show up in your workplace, do your job, and you get paid at the end of the month. But wait a second, this is very limiting life. Like, let's come to think about it. This is very limiting life, and I don't know if I would encourage anyone to live such life. Life is so robust that I feel each and every one of us should think about ways of making a difference. Our stay on this planet is limited, is constrained by time, so we don't have the luxury of infinity to start assuming we will be able to, do whatever we want to do at any given time. So that's why I want everyone to be entrepreneurial. That's why I preach entrepreneurship. Now, let me give you a little background. I was on from an entrepreneurial background. I mean, right now my family is an entrepreneurial family, but growing up, it wasn't like that. My parents just took normal pay job like most families all around the world, and they felt that was the safe nest for them. Yeah, but unfortunately, for me, I wanted to be an astronaut, right? So in the course of me wanting to be an astronaut, I started doing research and I realized the whole universities around me, none of them studies anything to do with astronaut or even aeronautic engineering. So that quickly made me start thinking differently. I thought about becoming a petroleum engineer. Reason being, where I came from in Nigeria, River State precisely, it's all about oil and gas. Like almost, let me say, like a lot of communities has oil wells, and yeah, a lot of communities have oil well, including the neighboring states around where I came from. There's so much oil, so the easiest and the most profitable employment you can get as a youth is working in the oil and gas sector. And luckily for you, if you have a degree in petroleum engineering or in any form of let's say petroleum gas engineering, yeah, you might be lucky to work in any of these oil and gas firms and you will be paid handsomely. This is not just peculiar to Nigeria, right? It also happens in other parts of the world. You go to Canada, Alberta is more known for oil patch, same oil and gas, and that's why we've seen places like Fort McMurray. Most of the people living in Fort McMurray and part of Prince George, they all work in the oil patch. Okay, back to business. For me, I had this mindset and it was just like that. So at some point, I bumped into a newspaper my dad bought, and the newspaper was talking about Argentina. It was a period where there was huge speculation on their oil well drying up. So me being a young kid wanting to do petroleum engineering, I was worried. Like I was probably 10 at the time, and I was just worried like if I should venture into this oil and gas and then eventually Nigerian oil well dries up, what will be my fate? You know, that fear made me, or I wouldn't want to call it fear, but I think I was just reasoning and trying to think long term. So I had to discard that. Next thing, I wanted to be a doctor because it looks noble. The profession looks noble, and it's respect. It commands respect. So just after high school, one of my teacher called me like, "Yo, Gibson, I understood you you want to be a doctor. You're smart. I know you. You have the grades. However, I wouldn't want you to be a doctor because I know just looking at you, you would want to be a rich guy." So I said, "Okay, so what should I be?" She said, "You have to be a businessman." For me, I paused for some minutes and I started imagining businessmen how. Just like, yeah, like doctors are not rich. Oh, jeez. Like, I was just, it was like cold. Like, I felt really cold. And I was like, doctors are not rich. Like, does this woman know what she's talking about? And she said, hold on a second. Doctors are not rich. The rich people are businessmen. That's where she ended that conversation. She didn't expand on that. Much later on, I got to realize um, that indeed, like the rich people we know are businessmen. And just before I forget, or just in case I forget by the end of this conversation, let me just throw it out. The next video I'm putting out is titled Business of Your Industry. All right, so back to it. So when we had that conversation and I was done, I was like, well, it's okay. So I went home and I started brainstorming, but I didn't really figure that fully, not until I got into college. When I went into college, I went for sciences, but at some point, the thoughts of that conversation kept hitting on me, and I started doing research on business. It was at that moment I realized the likes of Bill Gates, the founder of Microsoft, was a businessman. Larry Ellison was a businessman. Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, was a businessman. Elon Musk was a businessman. And I was like, whoa, up until that moment, I was looking at these guys, especially, like Zuckerberg. I thought he was just a programmer. And I didn't understand he was a businessman. So, that started creating a different view for me. And at that point, I started, I switched my program to economics and I wanted to understand how the economy works, how, you know, the basic human needs, questions asked by by people, like economic questions, what to produce, who to produce, and for whom to produce. I started learning, immersing myself in this knowledge. And somewhere down the line in 2012, I was in student politics, University of Saskatchewan in Canada. We had a VC who was making about 400 bucks, 400,000 a year. That's a lot of money, and for some reason she wanted to cut down on the expenses of the university. What she did was to cut down on was to cut down on staffs, and she had to do massive layoffs. Like over 50 staffs were laid off, and most of them were non-academic staff who are earning probably 35,000 a year, 40,000 a year. And I was so furious about what was happening, to the point I almost cried for these guys, because I know most of them, they have families, they have kids to take care of, they have bills to pay, they have house loan to pay, they have um, they have car loans to pay, they have all kinds of loans, and here they are, their job just got cut off. And I remember meeting one of them. His name was Mark. I was like, Mark, did you lose your job? He said, yes. Like, I lost my job and it is what it is. And whoa, at that point I said, now I'm starting to see the reason why one should be an entrepreneur, because nature doesn't care. Eventually, we came up with a policy to cushion that effect called transformers, and with time, the lady, like the VC, got sacked and we got a new VC. But the whole point is that's just one out of many. Usually when there is a major disruption in technology, there's usually tons of layoffs. We saw this happen in the dot-com boom, you know, when there was transition from the analog to like the whole dot-com of a thing just became just started coming up. we saw a lot of companies fold off. We saw the likes of blockbusters, they folded, a lot of people were affected, like employees. We saw, um, well, yeah, Netflix came up, took over the industry. We saw a lot of bookshops shut down. One of my favorite bookstore, Indigo, they're still operating, but they got hit really well, and they had to cut down on their staff because Amazon, took over the book publishing. Companies like Target, sorry, not Target, Zellers, went off business, and couple years ago, I think Sears also, like the big store Sears, got got out of business, and a lot of people, thousands and thousands of people, got laid off. Recently, we've seen this happen with tech giants, because now we are in a new economic era called the AI economy, right? And in this AI economy, a lot of jobs that could be done by multiple people can just be done with can be done by one person. And we saw jobs getting caught. Recently we saw Oracle Corporation, that's this month, this April. Oracle Corporation, laid off 30,000 workers. And like I said in that incident of my school, these workers, they have kids, they have families to take care of, they have bills to pay, they have a ton of stuff to you know, to do with money. Canada Post, they are working on laying off about 30,000 people too pretty soon. Meta, being Facebook, laid off 8,000, and the layoff just keep occurring. If you're conversant with the oil patch in Western Canada, especially the Fort McMurray, especially in Alberta, most times when they lay off or patch people, you see how some people even go as far as committing suicide. Some of them sell off their properties because they can't meet up, there's foreclosures and all that. So it's crazy. I don't see reason why anyone wouldn't want to be entrepreneur. I talk about entrepreneurship because to me it's just the real deal. Is the real deal. I see no reason why you shouldn't be an entrepreneur. I see no reason why you shouldn't embrace entrepreneurship. In this day and age, entrepreneurship is so easy. Okay, before even, yeah, it's so easy. On being an entrepreneur is so easy. Before now, if you're trying to get into tech, you either have to be a programmer, but unfortunately, a lot of programmers are not entrepreneurs. So you have to have some sort of money or take loan to be able to pay programmers to build your product, and but today, those barriers are no longer there. There are a lot of platforms or softwares that have been built to cushion that effect. To build an app before it used to cost a lot of money, but now not a whole lot. You don't even have to be a programmer to build an app, to build a website, to do the basic minimum. So it's a lot different than it used to be. With your mobile phone, you can start a company and start making money. You know, with a laptop, you can start a company and start making money. The world has moved past that stage of one thinking, well, I must get a paid job, I must get a paid job. For me, a couple years ago, I was talking to my follower that one of the best things that happened to Nigeria as a country was the arrival of late President Mohammed Buhari. And a lot of people hate him, reason being they just feel this guy came to bring in hardship and all that. Well, I don't think that's true. Like, I look at it from a different angle. What he did, he tried to encourage people to get into entrepreneurship, let people understand that, like, things are not the way you're used to think about it. Before now, people always have, my uncle is this, my uncle can send me money, but during Buhari's regime, things changed drastically. Uncles are not looking for who to sort them out, so now everybody have to come to the drawing table, you know, and start figuring out what can I do. And it was in his regime that a lot of Nigerian youth started doing what they used to consider menial jobs or menial businesses like hairdressing, makeup, tailoring. During that era, a lot of people were just jumping into it, there was a huge boom in skill economy in Nigeria. So everybody was just rushing for one skill or the other so they can start thinking about entrepreneurship, you know. And it's unfortunate that there are still people who don't see entrepreneurship as the way, and that's why I keep evangelizing this. All right. So now let me just quickly talk about some advantages of entrepreneurship. Well, if you're getting a job, right, your job ends the day you stop working. For most organizations, the day you stop working, they take your ID card, they take every property that belongs to them. If they gave you a laptop or phone, they take it back. I was once an employee. I worked with Microsoft, and the day I stopped working with them, they took back the laptop they gave to me. They gave me one of the latest. And it was a Sony Vaio when it came out. That should be in 2013. Yeah, they gave me that. They took it back, and I was back to using Mac. Right? They made me to stop using Apple, and now because I stopped working with them, they took it back. So some of you is like that, and you can't even transfer your job to your children. It's very sad. You can't transfer your job to your children. So your children will start all over fresh again. Looking at statistics, especially in developing countries like Nigeria, one of the things you notice, the moment people retire, poverty kicks in. Poverty, like intense poverty. Some men, find it so difficult to regain confidence. They just die from heart attack or something. It doesn't matter where you work. For those who work in oil and gas, most of them are used to having huge money, and because this money is no longer forthcoming the way it used to, boom, they die. They get into some sort of heart issues, health issues, and they just die off just like that. But for those who practice entrepreneurship, like, it's a lifetime thing. There's no retirement. And the cool thing about it, even if you decide to retire as an entrepreneur, you can transfer that to your kids, to your children. And the moment you pass that on to them, you can still they still enjoy the luxury of your knowledge. All the knowledge you've acquired in the past, your experiences, the guidance you give to them, and they just enjoy that, right? So that is one understand. So that also covers for legacy. And another interesting thing with entrepreneurship is for those who are married. It's crazy the way our society is now. We don't really have, like, for most kids growing up, they don't have leverage, economic leverage. So if you're working in a firm or with the government, majority of the times there's no leverage for which you can give to your kids, right? But as an entrepreneur, your kids have leverage. Either they start working with your firm, or if they can't join your company, if they want to start their own outright, you can provide them with funds or with loans through which they can start their own practices, right? So it always brings this leverage to kids, and it's just amazing. It's amazing stuff. I don't want to get so deep into it because there is a topic I'll be talking about this in details. Making profit is superior to earning wages. I wrote about this in my book titled Young Boys Start with $0. I shared my experience with um, having to start business in the midst of crisis, in the midst of financial crisis for me. I was able to turn my pain into entrepreneur adventure, and it was very, very good. So before I forget again, the next video will be on the business of your industry. A lot of people don't understand why there are some rich people in their industry. Like I told you when I started, when I was talking about my background, after my conversation with my teacher, I went back home and I thought about what she said. After a year, after 2 years, I was still thinking about it. And another thing I realized was, in every industry, There are rich people, there are poor people, So I'll be explaining that in the episode called The Business of Your Industry. And another interesting thing about entrepreneurship is it gives you freedom. Oh my. I know people argue this that do you really call that freedom when you have to work so much hours? Yo, like, do you understand the pain you feel when you have to take your kids to the hospital and you can't do that? Someone else have to do that, or you get some sort of you talk to your boss and your boss says no. Do you understand the pain your kids is going for a sports competition? Your kids is having some sort of school activities, maybe their baseball, volleyball, football competition, and you can't be there to cheer your kid up. It's just so painful, and this is because you're not an entrepreneur. So there's a whole lot about this, but I think for the sake of time, we're gonna end this episode here. So again, you have to be an entrepreneur. You have to think long term. I told you how at the age of 10, I read an article about Argentina oil were possibly drying up. And oh, by the way, that stuff later came to pass. As 2024, we saw there's this publication by Shell and Equinor. Shell is one of the big players in oil and gas drilling across the globe, and they discovered in one of their major oil wells, which is I think Arquette or Acreage, something like that, Acreage One in Argentina. There is no more there's no more hydrocarbons, no commercial hydrocarbons. So that actually confirms what I was reading about Argentina when I was age 10. So you have to think long term and start processing things. For some of you who don't have the luxury of being an entrepreneur, well, you can't really give excuse anymore because there's a whole lot, like it's a lot easier now with technology. There's a lot of businesses you can do from the comfort of your home. Somebody may ask, well, I'm a father, I'm a mother, I have kids, there's so much responsibilities, I have this job that I can't just let go of right now. How do I do it? Well, you can start a side business. There's a lot of side businesses you can start with less amount of money that will require less of your time. So I will also be talking about that in subsequent episodes. And I just want to let you all know that entrepreneurship for me is life, and it doesn't make any sense if in this day and age you don't want to be an entrepreneur, you're still contemplating being an entrepreneur. And for someone watching this that's pushing their kids, yo, you have to be a doctor, you have to be this. I want you to key in, like I want you to tune into the next my next video, being the next episode of this. I want you to tune in because why you want your kids to be a doctor, why you want your kids to be a lawyer, why you may want your kids to be a journalist, why you may want your kid to be an astronaut, why you may want your kids to be an engineer, maybe civil, mechanical, or a petroleum engineer. There is business in that industry, and that's what I'll be, dissecting in my next video. I want you to pay attention. Gone are those days when people start saying, well, if you're a doctor, you can't be a businessman. No, I will teach you the business of that industry. All right. So I wish you a very good day and see you in my next episode.